The whole track laughed when Matthew Cole rolled his flat silver homemade car onto pit lane. No flashy logos, no rich sponsors, just bare metal that nobody recognized. Snickers followed him as he signed in next to drivers with real championship trophies. They even mocked his 7-year-old daughter, clinging to the fence with her homemade sign. Richard Vance, 4-time defending champion. He laughed the loudest, completely blinded by his own arrogance. But nobody listened to the raw engine roaring in his backyard garage, a massive mistake. Smug crowds never pay attention, but they really should have this time. You and I are about to see what happens when quiet talent completely silences the crowd. Stick with me. Matthew completely tuned out those mocking racing crews. He steered his rig straight to the edge of the pit bay, pulled the brake, stepping out like a man who actually knows real hard labor. Climbing down from a truck he had driven 100,000 miles without a single complaint. At 34 years old, his scarred hands proved his worth long before he ever spoke. Thick, rough calluses lined the base of every single finger. Dark grease stained his fingernails, a permanent badge of honor no soap could wash away. He wore a faded navy work coat with no fancy name tag attached. His friend Oliver jumped down, dropping a heavy toolbox onto the pavement without a word. Just 2 quiet men, 1 machine, and absolutely zero flashy gear. Sitting cross-legged on the truck roof, taking in the chaos with wide brown eyes, sat a 7-year-old child. Little Bonnie Cole wore a baseball cap that was easily 2 sizes too big. Its faded cherry red fabric proved it had been deeply cherished for a very long time. The brim sat so low she had to tilt her chin up just to see. Stitched across the front in completely faded thread was the name Claire. She held a small homemade racing flag tightly in both her hands. Just scrap paper taped to a chopstick, spelling out "Go Daddy" in crooked green crayon that slanted uphill. Matthew knelt down by car 47, checking the tire pressure on his front left wheel. Real mechanics do not even need a fancy digital gauge. He simply pressed his thumb into the rubber, felt the firmness, and moved over without standing. Oliver silently handed him a wrench. Matthew adjusted a bolt on the suspension exactly 2 turns, then paused, holding completely still. He pressed his ear right against the cold hood, feeling the quiet metal breathe. Amateurs only stare at race cars, but real talent actually listens. 3 years back, he was the lead engineer at Vance Motorsport, a big team 40 miles north. He worked hard in that shop for 6 long years. By year 2, he rebuilt their fuel injection from scratch, cutting 1.4 seconds off lap times. Sounds like almost nothing, right? But you and I know a single second on this track defines an entire career. Then Richard Vance bought the company, completely gutting the whole operation in just 3 months. Matthew was ruthlessly fired on a random Tuesday morning. His wife Claire was rushed to the hospital that very same Thursday, fighting a severe complication those expensive doctors had missed for months. She never walked out of that hospital room again. Little Bonnie was only 4. You see, that is the true worth Richard Vance and his team never bothered to see. Most people never knew Claire Cole used to rally race. That silver car in Matthew's garage wasn't just some project built from scratch. For 2 years before Bonnie was born, they spent every weekend building that beast together. Sweating through cold nights in a rented shed with a broken heater and a cheap welder. But they never got to finish it. Matthew finished it alone over the next 2 years, wrenching in the cold with a baby monitor on his workbench. He didn't sign up for the Grand Prix just to chase some shiny corporate trophy. He showed up because of Claire's promise. She'd sat on a milk crate, grease on her face, holding a cup of cold coffee. "One day we are going to race at Harmon together." Starting that old engine was the closest he would ever get. Little Bonnie waved her tiny flag at the empty air, then held it perfectly still. You and I know this track. The Grand Prix ran for 40 years on family money. Recently, a corporate giant bought the whole thing out. They are a corporate machine obsessed with marketing, sponsors, and turning real drivers into polished products. Scarlett Harmon was running the show now. She took over at 22 when her father died, leaving the massive empire without a leader. Now 30, she had ruled this corporate empire with an iron fist for 8 years. In all that time, she never missed a single corporate profit target. She never apologized publicly, honestly, not even once. She was never caught on camera at the track without her tailored blazer and that cold composure most people called heartless. It was morning when Matthew dragged his rusty trailer into the pits. Scarlett sat high in her luxury tower, reviewing a financial risk report. The report was 12 pages long and she was already on page 9. Sebastian Cross silently set a hot coffee on her desk, unprompted as always. Her head assistant was 31, cold and calculating in every single move. He knew the exact temperature she wanted for her morning brew. He woke up his tablet and scanned the morning's official race items. Final driver list for the event, he said. 12 entries confirmed. 1 independent. Scarlett flipped the page. His name is Matthew Cole. Sebastian paused for a split second, a barely noticeable hesitation. He has no sponsors, no team, and 0 professional racing experience. Scarlett kept reading. Any rules broken? None. Then let him race. She turned to the final page as Sebastian slowly lowered his tablet. Years of working with her taught him that her icy silences were far more telling than any words she actually spoke. The discussion was over, but the moment he mentioned Matthew's name, something definitely shifted. Her posture locked up, just a tiny fraction, but enough to notice. Sebastian saw it clearly, but he wouldn't dare pry. He knew better than to ask questions. Stick with me here. He made a quick note to pull Matthew's background file before lunch. 40 minutes later, Richard Vance swaggered right into the private lounge. He walked like a man who believed his own hype, completely forgetting that true worth is built on sweat and grease, not corporate handshakes. He was 38 years old. He had won first place 4 times here, but you and I know today is going to be different. We both know his type. Flashy racing jacket, shaking Scarlett's hand. Wearing a fake, rehearsed swagger, trying way too hard to look natural. Good morning, Richard, Scarlett greeted flatly. Morning. Sitting uninvited, he oozed arrogance. I see you let a mechanic enter the pro race. Scarlett did not flinch. We have an open registration process. Richard just smirked. Of course we do. He grabbed the coffee Sebastian hadn't even offered him. Just saying, when a guy shows up with groceries and a socket wrench asking to race against seasoned track professionals, it really says a lot about the current grid's quality. A calculated pause, or the quality of your motorsport standards. Scarlett just stared at him for one cold, silent second. The track standards are mine to set. Richard raised both hands in a fake, innocent gesture, showing he meant every single insulting word he just spat. Standing up, he adjusted his expensive jacket and strolled toward the window. Once his back was turned, Scarlett stared down at her document, completely unblinking. Looking blankly at the bottom of the page, she saw words but didn't read a single one. Instead, she was remembering the past. That painful termination order she signed right after taking over Vance Motorsport. Just a single piece of paper crossing her desk as item 14 of 23. A corporate restructuring list she had blindly signed without reading the individual names. 61 names. She was only 22, trying to run a massive racing company for the very first time. Plus, 22 other urgent files were piled up waiting right after it. She finally turned toward the window. Down in the pit lane, a man in a faded navy jacket crouched by an old silver car, adjusting the suspension. Beside him, his little girl in a red cap quietly folded her paper racing flag. Scarlett watched them for 3 heavy seconds, then forced her eyes away. The driver press conference kicked off inside a cramped room right by the main grandstand. 11 pro drivers stood there, lined up in flashy team gear, posing perfectly against a wall of expensive sponsor logos. Then there was Matthew, standing at the far end in his worn navy work jacket. He had scrubbed his hands clean, but grease still stained his worn thumbnail. He stood there firmly grounded, his weight balanced, arms hanging loose and completely relaxed. Because you and I know that real talent never needs to perform for a crowd. Naturally, Richard Vance grabbed the microphone first, long before he even mentioned the actual race. He shot a slow, deliberate glare down the line at Matthew, an arrogant look meant to trigger the entire crowd. The crowd took the bait. Who let the shop foreman in? Richard sneered, barely even needing to raise his voice. Keeping it casual and quiet made it worse. He knew he held all the power. Nervous chuckles rippled through the press pit, that cheap, cowardly laughter of people who conform simply because they are terrified of ever standing alone in the silence. Matthew did not even flinch. He refused to give him attention. Staring at the back wall, he stood perfectly stoic. Never let a mocking crowd dictate what you are worth. A rookie reporter from a local outlet stepped up, her press lanyard still looking crisp. She cornered Matthew the moment the formal PR talk finally wrapped up. She shoved her recorder forward. "Mr. Cole, do you have any team sponsors for this race?" "No, a pit crew? 2 people," the reporter just hesitated. "Do you honestly think you have a real chance competing here? You and I know that talk is cheap." Matthew simply stared at the recorder. "I'm not here for a chance," he told her flatly. "I am here to race." She quickly wrote it down. That wasn't the flashy soundbite she wanted for her shallow motorsport article. She stared at her notes and looked up, but Matthew was already gone. He had work to do. Sitting right there in the front row of the spectator stands, Scarlett sat in silence with Sebastian just 3 empty seats away. She watched the entire media circus without showing a single reaction. When Richard ran his mouth at the microphone earlier, her face stayed completely stone cold. She just spun that silver ring on her right hand, a small band shaped like a gear. Plain metal, one quick turn with her thumb and then a dead stop. Sebastian tracked her hand but remained completely silent. Out by their rusty truck, young Bonnie ate a sandwich on the tailgate before Matthew emerged. She slid down from the steel, bolted over, and buried her face right into his side. He rested a heavy hand on her hair. "They were being mean," she muttered. "Some people just are. Are you sad?" Matthew knelt down to her eye level. "No." Bonnie searched his tired face with that raw, unfiltered stare of a child raised by a single parent, knowing exactly when he is faking it. "You make a face when you get sad," she whispered. "You think you hide it, but you don't." He met her eyes. Slowly his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, just the quiet start of one. That subtle look a man gets right before deciding if he should show some real emotion. It was the first time he dropped his armor in this loud, mocking paddock. Nearby, the spotlight chasing Richard Vance stood soaking up attention from hungry reporters. He noticed the little girl. He noticed the cameras pointing right at her. He strutted right over, his hands spread wide. Flashing a fake television grin, he dropped down beside her, angling his body perfectly so the press caught both his good side and the little girl. Bonnie stared at him, stone-faced. "What is your name, little sweetheart?" Richard cooed. "Bonnie, is that your daddy over there?" "Yes, he is pretty brave showing up here today." That hollow, performative tone adults use when they are playing to a crowd right behind them. Bonnie stared him down. "You are the one who fired him." She spoke flatly. It wasn't angry at all. "You and I know kids do not care about public relations." She simply stated the truth. "You are not his friend." That fake smile instantly froze. Then he stood up, gave the press a stiff nod, and quickly retreated back inside. A trackside photographer slowly lowered his heavy camera lens. A racing journalist quickly scribbled down some notes. But a third guy had already snapped the perfect shot. The photograph catching Matthew kneeling in the dirt, his daughter's tiny hand on his jaw. Her big red cap shining in the sun, father and daughter ignoring the chaotic world. It spread online instantly. By sunset, everyone realized that quiet resilience was the true soul of Car 47. Stick with me, because their real test came during morning qualifying under dark, threatening rain clouds. That first sector was still damp, but the track dried out from Sector 2 onward. Richard Vance easily clocked the fastest lap at 1 minute 40.23 seconds. His crew cheered with that loud, empty hype of people who demand everyone watch them. He held a massive lead, leaving second place nearly a full second behind. Then Matthew rolled out, 11th of 12. Oliver stood by the pit wall, clutching a stopwatch he had used for 15 years. He did not fully trust the old thing, but he never bothered replacing it. But listen closely. As Matthew cleared the pit lane and hit turn 1, everything changed. It was not any louder. Those other cars were just loud, flashy turbo builds, roaring simply to impress the laughing grandstands. But Car 47 was completely different. Its exhaust note was deep and incredibly dense, like the solid echo of a brick room compared to cheap, hollow drywall. A single circuit engineer stood up. Standing behind Sebastian in the timing tower, he slowly looked up from his laptop. He did not say a word, silently tracking the numbers on his screen. Matthew clocked 143.8, only 1.5 seconds behind Richard on damp asphalt, running old, heavily used tires. But the driving line he carved through that long, sweeping right-hander in Sector 2 looked nothing like what the flashy pros did. He went tight on entry and wide on exit, sacrificing the early apex to guarantee absolute maximum speed down the straight. It is a quiet, brilliant adjustment that loses a fraction in the turn but wins you 3/10 down the straight. The famous drivers just took the standard line they always used, blindly following what everyone else expected of them. You and I can see why. Matthew chose a different path, thinking like an engineer who knows the crowd's popular way is completely flawed. Sebastian had actually captured that entire run on his phone. He took the clip straight upstairs and threw the phone onto Scarlett's heavy wooden desk. She watched the footage once, then she immediately replayed it. Setting the phone face down, she stared out the window in complete silence for 4 seconds. Then she stood up and silently walked out of the tower. She didn't even tell Sebastian where she was going. She found him behind car 47, quietly inspecting the heavy wear on his left rear tire. He was crouched low, resting his forearms on his knees. He had the intense, quiet focus of a man solving a stubborn mechanical problem that had not given in yet. Oliver stood right next to him, taking notes in a worn book. Scarlett stopped a few feet back. "You built that custom intake yourself," she said. It was not a question, but it was far from a simple statement. It hung in the quiet air between them until Matthew finally looked up. He looked at her with the steady gaze of someone deciding if this talk was actually worth his energy, before committing completely once he realized it was. He measured her with his eyes, sizing her up in seconds. "You already know the answer," he replied calmly. "You are the boss. You definitely had my inspection sheet on your desk by 8 this morning. I want to hear it directly from you." He paused for a moment. Yes, it took 2 years. Scarlett studied the machine, looking past the grill at the custom intake, the hand-built housing, and those raw, non-standard lines. We know why. She saw it as absolute proof of his quiet worth. She dissected his machine like a corporate document, hunting for a reason to scoff, checking raw physics, stubbornly refusing to judge the build without hard facts. "This is a volumetric efficiency upgrade," she admitted quietly. "You changed the plenum geometry." Matthew stood firm. "You know intake design." "I know a few things." Her icy reply shut down any real connection. She scanned the cheap paint, desperate for flaws, then glared at him. "Our techs cleared your car." "I know. Then show them your worth tomorrow." She walked away. He stayed silent, letting his masterpiece do the talking. Oliver watched her leave, staring at Matthew in quiet, absolute disbelief. Right then, little Bonnie ran through the mocking corporate crowd, clutching a half-eaten apple. She climbed right onto their battered home-built racer, sitting proudly on the sill. She locked eyes with the wealthy executive, who froze dead in her tracks. "Is our car pretty?" Bonnie asked her. The rich woman just stared. The little girl stared back with absolute, unbothered pride. She held her apple down, demanding respect for their hard work. "Yes." Scarlett spoke, completely shedding the fake mocking tone of her corporate world. She spoke with raw honesty, where cheap laughs end and true worth begins. Bonnie nodded, fully satisfied with their machine, taking another bite. "Let's dig into the past." That night, Sebastian sent her an old employment record. Just 2 quick pages. The truth about Matthew's worth was buried at the bottom. Reason for termination: structural downsizing under executive order. Approved signature: Harmon. Scarlett stood frozen inside the luxury hotel elevator, gripping her phone as that heartless corporate document stared back at her. She didn't even remember to push the button for her floor. The elevator waited, its heavy doors hanging wide open. She stared at her own signature, the author of a heartless executive decision. A forgotten choice that ruined an incredible builder she had deemed worthless. Finally, she hit the button. The heavy steel doors slid shut. Let's see how the establishment plays. At 11:17, a cowardly rival named Derek slipped into Matthew's garage. He wore a fake uniform, hiding behind a stolen staff lanyard. Spending 7 tense minutes inside, he made 2 spineless hidden modifications. He rigged the thermal valve on the cooling system, ensuring Matthew's motor would slowly overheat right when the car faced maximum racing stress, right between lap 7 and lap 9. Then he loosened the front right wheel bolt, letting it survive 8 grueling laps of high-speed racing. only to snap completely on the ninth lap under brutal pressure in the fastest, most dangerous sweeping corner. He slipped away at 11:24. But the idiot completely missed the security camera watching from above the door. Installed for security, it quietly captured every single second of his pathetic, desperate attempt to sabotage them. Matthew couldn't sleep a wink. He sat in the narrow hallway near sleeping Bonnie, staring blankly at the floor, carrying the weight of tomorrow. Then he slowly opened his wallet. Tucked safely inside, hidden right behind his license and an old fuel receipt, was a single worn photograph. It was small, with a deep crease folded over one corner. "You and I know true legacy endures." In the photo, a proud woman sat in that very same silver car, parked in their old garage. She was laughing at something off camera, grease smeared dirty across her cheekbone. She had absolutely no clue anyone was watching. Matthew snapped the photo quietly, because in that moment she was entirely real. Like the true, unguarded self we rarely let a mocking world see. He quietly stared at that worn photo for a long time. Tucking it away, he sat with hands loose between his knees, letting the empty hallway swallow all the doubts in his head. By the next morning, Oliver hit the garage before Matthew even arrived. He popped the hood for a quick pre-race check and just froze. He stared blankly at the coolant circuit for 11 dead seconds. Dropping to the concrete, he studied the right wheel carrier. 4 more seconds of dead silence. He dialed his phone. The hard-working single dad picked up on ring number 1. Matthew walked in. Oliver just pointed, and Matthew immediately dropped to a crouch. He checked the valve setting. No natural wear, no accidental cracks to blame. Nothing a basic, checkbox safety inspection would ever flag on official paperwork. It was deliberate sabotage. He checked the wheel assembly, eyeing the tampered bolt. He didn't touch a thing. Standing up, Oliver quietly muttered, "Report it." Matthew stared up at the ceiling. "We have no proof of who. Start making noise now, and they will just use red tape to delay us. We are done before we even begin, so we fix it. No complaints. He just knelt by the valve, saying, "Give me 15 minutes. You and I know cowards always hide." At 6:41, high above the sleeping racetrack, Sebastian Cross scrolled through the overnight security footage, looking for anyone trying to dodge the spotlight. A strict routine they kept locked down tight. Ever since that massive gear theft 2 seasons ago. He spotted the rat at 11:17, watching those 7 cowardly minutes. He noted the exit at 11:24, recognizing Derek's face instantly. Derek had blended smoothly into their technical crew for 3 full years. Sebastian saved the video file and just sat there, letting the dirty reality sink in. Without saying a single word, he knocked on the adjoining door. Scarlett opened it in 30 seconds flat, fully dressed and holding her black coffee. Sebastian just silently held up his tablet screen. She studied the footage, spotting the badge and the angle showing the tampered wheel assembly. "Who exactly does Derek answer to?" she asked. Sebastian kept quiet, but Scarlett held his stare. "Vance Motorsport has paid him quietly on retainer for 2 seasons, Sebastian replied. Completely off the books. Scarlett placed her coffee cup on the table. She stared out at the track where real, honest mechanics were already grinding under garage lights. The morning was heavy and quiet. "Do not delete that file," she ordered. Grabbing her smartphone, she walked straight over to the glass. "You and I know race day always exposes the truth under a hard, honest blue sky." By 6 in the morning, the track swarmed with eager crews, vendors, and loud fans. By 9, the stands were filling, and by 10, the noisy, judgmental crowd was packed tight. Forget the flashy VIP catering. Matthew shared breakfast with Bonnie inside the truck cab, just yogurt for her, coffee, and a protein bar for him. Bonnie ate with quiet, serious focus, staying completely silent until her cup was empty. "Are you scared?" she finally asked. "No," you say quietly. She just stares back at you. It's that exact same piercing stare from yesterday, the kind that cuts right through your excuses. "You're making that face again," she says. "I'm really not." "You totally do." You stay dead silent, then mutter, maybe slightly. Bonnie sets her snack aside and reaches into the back seat. Digging into a worn bag, she pulls out a faded red cap and offers it to you. "Mom always said this keeps you from getting lost," she says, shoving it onto your head. It hangs way too low, completely blocking your vision. She claims it always worked like a charm for her. You touch the brim, leaving it low, sharing a quiet look with your daughter. She stares back. Gently, you pull the cap off, resting it on the seat between you. 40 minutes to green light. You strap your helmet on, handing the red cap back. She pulls it onto her own head. Then she climbs up to the metal railing of the packed spectator zone. 6 feet from the pit lane, she grips that cold bar tight. 20 minutes before the race begins, Scarlett marches down from the tower. She strides down the pit lane with absolute focus. To the wealthy, mocking crowds, it's just business as usual in this loud racing circus. Her phone is tight in her grip, her thumb swiping casually at a blank screen. A rare slip. Scarlett Harmon never holds her tech without a real purpose. She marches straight to your garage bay and freezes. You are strapped into your cockpit, silently running your dashboard diagnostics. Oliver stands near your battered rear wing, ticking his clipboard. Scarlett plants herself at the nose of car 47, waiting. You simply glance down. You and I know that heavy silence. It's the quiet armor an underdog wears to prove the sneering crowd wrong. I know about the valve, Scarlett states, and that wheel bolt. The tension is thick enough to cut. I know who snuck in last night, she adds. I've got the tape plus 2 years of records tying Derek to Vance Motorsport. She takes a breath. I already made the call. You meet her gaze. What call, you ask? Richard is pulling out today. A mechanical failure, according to the official motorsport event paperwork. But the real truth stays with me. Her tone is pure ice, the sound of someone who knows exactly how to silence the wealthy skeptics laughing at your car. Derek is fired. The whole file hits the racing board tonight. Oliver stops ticking boxes on his dirty clipboard. He stands perfectly rigid by the back end of your car. You speak up. Why bring this to me yourself? Scarlett takes the question without flinching once. Because I owe you this, maybe more. She lets the silence hang heavily. Because you have 12 grid spots to climb in 3 laps. Focus on results and let your speed silence their laughter. She rests a hand on your dusty hood, barely gripping the metal. Just a light graze with her flat palm for 2 short seconds. A quiet sign of deep respect, real recognize real, no applause needed. Then she walks off. You track her for 3 solid seconds. You lock your eyes back on the dashboard. Time to silence the laughing crowd. Scratched right into the dull finish of the casing. A single letter sat there, so tiny the laughing snobs never even noticed it. Just the letter C. I gripped the wheel, ignoring their stares. Exactly 10 a.m. we charged out under a blazing blue sky. $12 million cars rolled out, but after the warm-up, only 11 made the grid. Car number 1, driven by some pro, pulled out late with vague technical issues. That sudden delay rippled through the mocking grandstands and scrambled the trackside reporters for a moment. Then the green lights flashed, the race exploded, and all eyes snapped forward. I started in 11th. Honestly, I spent the first 5 laps studying the track like an engineer. I watched the pack, tracking exactly where those shiny, expensive teams hit their brakes. I mapped their drift on fast turns, spotting exactly where they left slow corners wide open. I noted where the fresh, sticky tire rubber coated the asphalt. I calculated peak grip on the track, figuring out where my home-built racer could take a wild, unorthodox angle. My boy Oliver spoke over the radio, calm and completely steady, feeding me tire temperatures and precise lap sector times. On lap 6, I finally made my move. Trust me on this. I completely ignored the easy overtakes on the long back straight, that exact spot where every hotshot driver desperately tries to shave off split seconds. I hunted them in the corners. I exploited the gaps left by wealthy pros running the same stale lines for 12 years, guys too terrified to nail a late apex in the chicane. I struck during that single split second of pure driver hesitation. It always happens right before the tight hairpin, when they get boxed in by slower traffic. From 11th to 9th, 9th to 7th. Oliver went silent, he was just counting. On lap 7, my custom 47 car flew out of the second sector, diving into the sweeping curve before the straight. I was already sitting in 5th. I was only pushing my home build to 70%, still searching for the exact breaking point of our custom hand-tuned suspension on this rough track, because any real engineer never demands raw power from a machine until they know exactly what it can handle. I found that sweet spot right midway through the turn. I felt the rear tires bite, no sliding, no breaking loose, just pure traction, like steel anchors hitting solid bedrock. At that moment, I finally understood our worth. It is a feeling you only get when you build every part by hand. I knew exactly what my creation could do, so I unleashed every ounce of power. The exhaust note shifted. It hit at peak corner pressure, right when our custom intake system reached the heavy load it was truly built to handle, letting the massive airflow of our backyard setup finally kick in. The engine roar dropped half an octave, expanding incredibly wide in. Its deep rumble, turning into something that barely sounded like a polished race car anymore. It sounded raw, old school, and a whole lot less complicated. Like an old beast kept locked up for years, finally unleashed without any wealthy restrictions holding it back. You and I know what happened next. 2,000 silent spectators heard it together. Their laughter died first, then nobody even moved. Suddenly, everyone who laughed at our budget build snapped their eyes back to the track. Because that roaring backyard engine made their $1 million screens completely useless. Our beat-up car 47 tore out of the corner, breaking the elite lap times. Down in the grandstands, the rich sponsors thought the timing software had surely broken. He blew past two flashy multi-million-dollar competitors, not even touching his brakes yet. Fifth, fourth, third, Oliver stopped caring about their fancy numbers. He just gripped the cold pit wall, mesmerized by this beautiful defiance. Little Bonnie stood proud on the spectator barrier's second rail, feet dangling, hands gripped tight, her cap pushed way back. She kept screaming encouragement, her tiny voice completely swallowed by the roaring pro engines. Her small knuckles were bone white. Scarlett stood silently near the pit lane's edge, 20 feet back, completely alone. With Sebastian hovering silently behind her, she just stared at the asphalt. Her right hand dropped to her side, and her restless thumb froze. The same thumb that spent 2 days spinning her gear ring in nervous circles was suddenly, completely still. Her little ring was finally still. You know that moment when raw talent forces you to stop doubting yourself? She just stood there, speechless, embracing this sudden stillness. On the final lap, he lunged from third to second right before the tricky technical section. A brutal chicane demanding 2 violently fast changes in direction. Right in succession, where the fastest line stayed completely hidden from the pros. He cut inside where the pampered drivers placed their cars, simply because they'd been taught to keep a safety margin that Matthew knew was completely pointless. Snatching the lead at the 300-meter board before the final turn. Because the leader tapped his brakes out of habit, while Matthew just flat-out refused to lift. He flew the final 400 meters to the checkered flag, foot pinned flat. Stunned silence fell over the track the second our budget car crossed the finish line. 1 second where the entire snobbish crowd had to digest the undeniable proof, with their own eyes forced to accept the undeniable talent they once laughed at. Honestly, that was 1 second where years of expensive privilege got destroyed by raw talent. And then the deafening cheers erupted. Matthew parked his beat-up, backyard machine in the winner's circle, just sitting there as the engine idled. Oliver was screaming through the radio, but Matthew tuned out the noise entirely. He ignored the cheering stadium, treating their sudden praise like a passing afternoon breeze. Just noise. Because when you know your own worth, the crowd's opinion means nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the dashboard's corner, staring at a single letter carved deep into the metal. Gently, he rested his calloused hand over it. After 3 quiet seconds, he popped the heavy driver's door and stepped out. Oliver was sprinting across the track before Matthew's boots even touched the ground, letting out a wild, wordless yell. A raw roar of respect that this elite crowd was finally forced to give him. He grabbed Matthew by both shoulders, screaming victory cries that got swallowed by the deafening grandstands. Down by the spectator barrier, a tiny girl wearing a red cap shoved her way through the stunned crowd. A marshal lunged to stop her, but a woman standing near the gate firmly shook her head. Just a brief, unyielding look and the track marshal backed away. Little Bonnie sprinted across the hot tarmac, hitting Matthew right at waist height with both arms wrapped tight, absolutely refusing to let go. Matthew held his daughter tight, ignoring the noise. He stood on the hot asphalt in his faded suit, holding her close. The crowd's roar didn't define him anymore. He just stayed still, knowing exactly what they were truly worth. Later, after the shiny trophies were claimed and the stadium finally emptied, the cameras packed up, and the fleeting cheers began to fade away. Scarlett eventually found Matthew standing near the expensive VIP tents. He held his beat-up helmet, while tired little Bonnie trudged along beside him, leaning heavily against his leg with every slow step. She knew his real value. She used him as her anchor, the way tired kids do when they are determined to prove they can keep going. Scarlett stopped right in front of them, admitting, "I owe you a real apology." No corporate doublespeak this time. She just laid the raw truth out there. "I blindly signed your firing papers in a huge stack back in 2021. I never even read your file," she whispered. "I really should have." Matthew quietly watched her. "You know that does not change the past." "I know, it does not fix the last 3 years, I know that too." Holding his gaze, she added, "I still had to say it." He remained silent. Finally he said, "Okay, I hear you," while looking down at his worn helmet. "You used to race," he noted. It was a statement of shared unspoken truth. "We both know that tone. It is the quiet respect of people who do not need a crowd's approval. A quiet acknowledgement of the inner worth they both possessed but never talked about." Scarlett looked down, staring at the small silver gear ring on her finger. "That was 8 years ago," he said. "Do you miss it?" Looking up, she showed her real self for the first time since he learned her actual name. After 48 long hours of wearing her fierce corporate armor to protect herself. Reconnecting with the passionate racer she used to be, before she became a corporate suit, she smiled. Not the fake, polished smile designed to please onlookers at high-profile events. Something completely genuine. A true reflection of the passion she had buried long ago to appease the critics. "Every single day," she confessed. Bonnie suddenly pulled on Matthew's hand. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" "We definitely can." Bonnie looked at her with pure, unfiltered honesty. Kids do not care about keeping up appearances for the crowd. "You should come along," the girl insisted. "You helped." Scarlett quickly glanced at Matthew. He looked off into the distance past her shoulder, holding an unreadable expression. But a subtle smirk revealed that deep, unshakable sense of self-worth that no outside critic could ever hope to steal from him. The spark of a new beginning. A quiet moment of deciding whether to step out of the shadows. "Okay, let's go," Scarlett agreed. They walked toward the exit gates together, ignoring the remaining onlookers as Matthew held his helmet low with pride. Holding a toy flag in her small hand, the little girl gently wrapped her fingers around Scarlett's wrist. Not her hand, just holding her wrist very softly. It was a child's gentle way of guiding an adult who had forgotten how to walk her own path. Behind them, Car 47 sat quietly on the empty track, its silver paint shining proudly in the final rays of sunset. The massive, empty grandstands were silent. Big sponsor banners fluttered gently in the cool breeze coming from the west. Safe inside the cockpit, hidden far away from the prying eyes of the crowd. A small letter carved into the metal dashboard remained hidden in the darkness. "We both know this truth. Your real worth shines brightest when you silence the doubters on your own terms. Dare."